Have you ever finished a screenplay and then wondered, do I even have a story? I mean, you have pages, lots of pages, maybe even around 183 pages, which is way too many. Surely you've got a story in there. But I read so many screenplays that have lots of words, lots of stuff happening, lots of characters, but no story. And this happens way more often than you think, but I want to help you like I've helped hundreds of my students tell better stories. So I'm going to give you a checklist you can use to evaluate if you have a story, and along the way, questions to answer to help you fix it. But first, we've got to talk about what a story is not, because there's just a lot of confusion. In fact, I used to think I knew what a story was. After all, I had watched hundreds of movies and TV shows. I read lots of things. I know what a story is. That's what I thought when I started out, but I was completely wrong. One of the first things you'll hear is that a story is something that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Thank you, Aristotle. But what a lot of people just do is they take that at surface level. But that means that this is a story. Words, words, and more words, and final words. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end, but that's clearly not a story. And that's why I try really hard to make distinctions when I say things like scripts versus stories. Because not all screenplays are stories. In fact, most of them aren't. They may have a beginning, a middle, and an end, but there's no story. And Aristotle implied way more than that in his articulation of that saying. And just by thinking you have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then thinking you have a story, well, that's a recipe for disaster. And I'll get to a better definition of what a story is in a second. But what about this one? A story is a series of events. Even better, a series of connected events. Well then, this is a story. Grocery list, keys, wallet, grocery store, strawberries, whipped cream, pound cake, home, strawberry shortcake. Technically, it's a series of connected events, and there's also a beginning, a middle, and an end. And while it is, I suppose, a story, you don't care about it. In fact, if I were to tell you that that's the beginning of a story about a party that's being hosted, I doubt any of you would want to hear that story. Why? Well, there's no one for us to care about. And one of the things that screen stories fundamentally require is that stories be about someone. And that's because as people, we don't care about events. We care about the people those events happen to. Even more than that, we care about people who struggle to achieve something while the events are happening around them. Sometimes their actions cause those events. Sometimes they just have to react to events, but they are living within the things going on. So if you're just talking about what a story is, the best definition I've found is this. A story is about someone who wants something badly, who is having trouble getting it, and they get it or they don't. And this simple definition creates your checklist. So we're going to take it in pieces, and technically there's 4 pieces, but in actuality there are 6 or 7, depending on the story that you're telling. So first is the someone. When a Hollywood reader starts reading a screenplay, the first question they're wanting answered is this: whose story is it? And that doesn't mean you have to introduce the main character on page 1, but there does need to be, fairly soon in the script, a moment where we find out whose story it is. In The Dark Knight, we start on this robbery, which does include the Joker. But it's clear it's not his story, it's Batman's story. And if I were to ask you right now for the script that you're working on, whose story is it? Do you have one character name to give me? Most of the time when I ask people with whom I do script consultations with, whose story is it, I get anywhere from 2 to 4 character names. But a story is about someone. Not some 2s, not some 4s, someone. So if you can't name who your story is about, you don't have a story. But Jake, there are exceptions. Well, sure there are. And people do, in fact, win the lottery. But those are rare and not the norm. Dual protagonist stories are just as rare. And even then, when there are 2 protagonists, both of them could actually work through this checklist that I'm giving you, and I'll explain that with The Dark Knight here in a minute. The second item on the checklist is the someone who wants something badly. The next thing any reader is looking for is something to root for. If I'm a reader, I want to pick a side. And you do too. Or you watch any movie, you are rooting for someone or against someone to get whatever it is they're after or to not get it. Bruce Wayne, the Batman, wants to bring down the Joker. That's what he wants. And he is trying to stop the Joker at every turn. And if Batman catches the Joker, we'll know the Batman wins. If not, he loses. And this creates stakes and makes us invested in the story because now we want a specific outcome. We are going to be rooting for something. So now with your screenplay that you're working on, you have the someone. My next question is this. In one sentence, tell me what they want badly. The in one sentence is important because if you can't simplify their want, your story is just going to wander all over the place. Make it focused. But the other thing is the want must be visually measurable. We want to see Batman catch and stop the Joker. If the Joker is just running around free, okay, Batman hasn't succeeded. And at one point we think the Joker's been caught, but he's one step ahead, so not caught yet. So if you don't have a measurable goal of what the main character wants, no story. Numbers 3 through 6 of our checklist, which are all grouped kind of under one umbrella, and it's in the phrase, have trouble getting it. We don't want to watch stories where it's too easy for the main character. Those are boring and we quickly lose interest. What is more interesting is when the main character has extreme trouble getting what they're after. Easy options are tried first because we as people, we do the easy things first. But when those don't work out, the obstacles get bigger and harder. So the group of these things are essentially all the obstacles. But ideally, you want to identify 3 to 4 specific obstacles. And each one makes it tougher for the main character to get what they want. There might even be some false victory along the way, but in the end, it's tougher for the main character to get what they want each obstacle they go through. In The Dark Knight, you have Batman at first trying to prevent the deaths of key city officials in an effort to stop the Joker. He fails. Then there's a ruse to catch the Joker, and they get him. Until the Joker shares that he has 2 people kidnapped, one of them ends up dying, one becomes Two-Face, a new villain Batman's got to deal with, and the Joker escapes. So, fail. Number 3, Batman needs to find the Joker. But to do so, Batman has to cross a moral line. Once he finds the Joker, obstacle 4, he still has to stop him and hopes to save 2 boatfuls of people. 4 big obstacles. And if you want a bonus tip, these are what is known as sequences. And you can plan out your story by taking each obstacle and building a little mini story around it. So let's look at the first obstacle, Batman trying to save the city officials. It's Batman's story, so whose story is it? It's Batman's. What does he want more than anything? Well, he wants to save the city officials, and he has trouble getting it. In fact, 3 of them die. The judge, the mayor, the chief of police, and Batman fails at what he wants in that first obstacle, the sequence. And the same is true for all of the other larger sequences that contain the big obstacles. So in your checklist, what are 3 or 4 specific obstacles the main character faces in trying to get what they want? And if you can't name 3 or 4 specifically, you don't have a story. And these should be difficult obstacles, not oh, I want some coffee. Oh, bummer, Starbucks is closed. Well, now I got to make some myself. Okay, no, you got to make it hard for your main character. Otherwise, it's not entertaining or engaging. And the last item you need to have a story is the result, the outcome, they get it or they don't part. By the end of The Dark Knight, we know if Batman has caught the Joker or not. And yes, he does. The boats don't blow up. He saves Gotham. Sort of. Okay, but that's the third act. The result of what happens of the main character getting it or not is what sends the story into the third act. But the main story, the core, is the second act. And the second act starts when the main character, the someone, decides to go get the things they want. So once Batman learns of the Joker, Act 2 begins. And he's trying to stop the Joker through the whole second act. And he has difficulty along the way with the obstacles. And at the end of the second act, we get an answer. Does he catch the Joker or not? And in this case, yes, he catches the Joker. And that's the story. Now, yes, there is a third act. And Harvey Dent as Two-Face has to still be dealt with, okay? But that's the third act. As the Joker is caught and he's hanging there, he tells Batman that Batman did not fully save Gotham, that Harvey Dent has been corrupted because...
like gravity, all it takes is a little push.
Batman even laments later that he, in fact, didn't win. Yes, he caught the Joker, but the Joker corrupted one of the best people of the city. So even though the Joker lost, he won. So taking your main character, who you have, what they want, which you've identified, the 3 or 4 big obstacles, giving them trouble along the way, which you've noted, the only thing left is for you to determine whether the main character gets what they want or not. And it doesn't matter what the answer is. They can get it or they don't have to, but you must have an answer. And it's at the end of the second act, not the end of the script, at the end of the second act. And then you're going to test your main character in the third act with some new problem to solve, some new goal. In Batman's case, will he stop Harvey Dent? That's the third act. But that's not the story. The story takes place in the second act. Will he stop the Joker? And I mentioned about dual protagonists, but here's the thing. The core of the story, the main story, has to hang on someone who wants something badly, is having trouble getting it, and they get it or they don't. But the supporting characters also need that. The Joker wants to cause chaos in Gotham and force Gotham's heroes to break their moral code.
Do I really look like a guy with a plan?
He dares Batman to kill him multiple times, wanting Batman to cross the line.
Batman!
And ultimately, Batman does cross the line to find the Joker. The only way for Batman to get the upper hand is to cross the line. So the Joker, who wants the heroes of Gotham to break their moral code, has difficulty getting what he wants, for sure, but ultimately, even though he gets caught, he does manage to break both Batman and Harvey Dent, and he gets what he wants. So give your supporting characters a measurable goal too, and difficulty getting it. But your checklist of whether or not you have a story is really only there to get you started. I mean, yeah, sure. You can use it to verify your story that you've written and make sure that you've actually got a story. But you should be answering those questions before you start writing, because that helps you know if you even have a story to begin with. I mean, why waste time writing 100 pages if you don't even have a story? Use your time better than that. But once you have a plan for a story, now you have to draft it. And in this video, I walk you through one of the easiest ways to move from outline to first draft. Now, if you want to work with me and let me help you through all this, there are links below, but this will definitely get you started.